Good evening, I'm at the Mint Internet of Things conference in New Delhi and I'm speaking to Rahul Bhasin, who is the managing partner of Bearing India Private Limited. Thank you, Rahul, for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Firstly, I think you've given a very comprehensive understanding on stage of what IoT should mean. Can you elucidate a little bit on that?
It takes a good 10-15 years, and if you think about all the enabling architecture for IoT, it was actually by 1998, 1999 that most of this was created. And now you're beginning to see momentum in business applications and innovation which is centered around all of this. It's very clear that if you look at expensive devices, they were connected long time ago. Aircrafts and their landing systems are connected through a very similar kind of technology with the airports, right? Which feeds information as to the speed at which an aircraft is approaching, the landing speeds, the optimal, and it helps correct on autopilot a lot of the landing issues, and it corrects for weather patterns, for wind velocities, for different kind of air pockets through this mechanism. Right? But the application set for this industry is very wide. The challenge with anything to do with Internet of Things, etc., is that you're talking about information gathering at a point, and then it being able to communicate with, a wider information or a database or a connected thing, so that something can be done about that information, that knowledge can be assimilated, and for that you need the communication infrastructure to be in place. Which frankly in our country it's a little spotty, and there are pockets where it works and it works fine, maybe in some of the larger cities, but even there, if you look at the global metrics and standards, I mean, if you look at the South Korean standards for 3G, 4G, etc., and you look at where we are way behind in terms of communication
So, on
speeds,
that note,
protocols.
why do you think India is a laggard? Why is it that we are still behind the curve? What are the challenges that we are facing?
I don't think that technologically we are behind. We are behind in terms of the investments. Why are we behind in terms of the investments? Because fundamentally, I think the government has viewed the telecom industry as a great source of potential revenue, rather than for creating a policy framework which accelerates investment in infrastructure and investments in technology. I think that given how poor we are and what poor purchasing power that we have, I think that there is a choice, and if you if the choice that the government makes for alternative uses of the revenue, they feel that it's better applied somewhere else, then that excess cash flow will not accrue to the telecom industry, which therefore then struggles to make those investments. I think there is a case to incentivize the telecom industry to actually, make all this infrastructure investments in the country. I think inevitably it will happen, but just because of a price value equation and the price sensitivity of our ecosystem here, I think it will lag the latest technologies in most parts of the world.
So, what's your advice for entrepreneurs in the startup space as well as heading companies? What do you think they should do to be able to cope with the challenges and also successfully implement the IoT enterprise wide?
When you're not part of the technology value chain, and usually it's in these kinds of technology value chain, it's usually the person who's defined the standards and the protocol of communication who tends to be able to derive the maximum profitability, and I think that people like Qualcomm, etc., probably best placed to capture that value, or it's those who create the enabling infrastructure and the Ciscos of this world, etc., again are better placed to capture value. I think the Indian entrepreneur is probably best placed to use customization and application development of this entire enabling technology, and the applications are innumerable. It's far more than you and I can conceive of or imagine, and as long as there is a payback, right? For example, I think that this technology will have huge applications in the entire agricultural space. You could embed these kind of chips into tillers, which will measure as you till soil. It will measure the soil content, the chemical composition, which fertilizer is missing, for which crop, when the fields need to be watered. You can actually fine tune agricultural productivity and outcomes through devices like this. The government can gather data on whole areas as to what lacuna there is or there isn't, and can plan intervention or facilitation of help. So there is a lot of social applications too to something like this. You can look at it purely from older people living on their own. They can easily have some band which measures their own activity, etc., and it can alert a medical establishment in the vicinity, right, so that they don't need to actually reach out. That device will inform people if there is an issue or there is a even if there are palpitations, it should be able to measure it and communicate that.
So is it fair to summarize that India is slow, but it will surely get there sooner or later?
I think that any new innovation tends to be, the applications tend to be expensive. It's when costs drop and there's a wider application that you actually end up, that diffusion of innovation is the game to play. And I think that India is well placed to play that game. But my only advice would be is that if you find that application in India and you can reduce costs to make it accessible to a lot more people, then don't set your visions only on the Indian market. There's a vast market out there who has much more purchasing power, and you should try and address that wider market almost instantly. And today the World Wide Web offers you solutions without having to set up infrastructure, etc., whereby you can do it. If you see Xiaomi, the phone company out of China, they don't have a distribution network in India, right? But they sell so many phones here, right? Just by the power of branding and the power of using network internet partners and using the e-commerce space. And you can create similar kinds of devices, but I'm saying if you get the solutioning right and you know that there's relevance there, you should identify and map out the globe as your market rather than just the local ecosystem.
Great.
And therefore you'll be able to have scale companies available.